Alright, we are recording and just finished chapter 8. Um, I was surprised by how many notes I was taking. Not necessarily criticisms of them, but just things to note. It was a longer chapter than some of the others, but I was expecting it to be a little bit more straightforward, where I wouldn't have as much to talk about. But I do have things. So this covers in the movie from... Wait exactly is? Starts with them on the Falcon. So like when Luke is getting their first training, and there's also the chess scene, and goes until uh Kenobi's already left to deal with the tractor beam power sources. Luke has just given the cuffs to Han to cuff Chewbacca before they leave to try to rescue the princess. So that's about the time it's covered here. Um, yeah, some interesting things. One is the chess game that I mentioned is also in this. The movie does it better though. The simplest way thing to put it is there's too much talking in the book, and the lines are not as good. It's like they're more so describing what's happening here, but it's like the joke is one that requires brevity. You don't have the whole, but droids aren't known for ripping people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. It's like you don't have it quite like that. I mean, there is a threat that Chewie will rip both the arms off of both of you for this, and 3PO does immediately turn then to be like, well, there's nothing really fair or good about beating somebody who you've clearly better than. So go ahead and lose, R2. Um, it's like it's much longer. It's not nearly as much fun. Um, Another change in that scene that is actually somewhat interesting. Han is not as dismissive of the Force in the book as he is in the movie. In the movie, it's just we've been everywhere. He hasn't seen anything to convince him. No, it's more so he hasn't seen anything to make him think the Force doesn't exist, but that he does reject the idea of the Force controlling him. That basically his fate is his own, is some way to put it. It is funny because reading through it and thinking about it, his character is quite consistent here. He is the survivor. He cares about himself. He will take care of himself. So obviously, the idea of something else controlling him, he rejects that because no, he's on his own. He does this himself. And there's also I believe in luck, and Kenobi is. Well, wait, hang on. What is it? I'd rather be lucky. I don't remember the exact line, but Kenobi is somewhat dismissive of that. Duh, duh, duh. No, wait, no, it is early. Um, do. Sorry about this. Okay, that is. I think I went past it when flipping because I want to get the line right, and it's gonna bother me if I don't. Oh yeah, I'd call it a luck, snorted Solo as he concluded his examination of the readouts. In my experience, there's no such thing as luck. And that's where the movie kind of ends, but it continues. No such thing as luck, my young friend. Only highly favorable adjustments of multiple factors to incline events in one's favors. Doesn't ring as well, does it? And that's kind of what was wrong with the chess game. Um, oh, yeah, that's right. One thing that I do think interesting, and actually I should really try to look back. I don't know if I'd be able to find it quickly. I suspect from how something is explained in here, and I know what I'm looking for, I just don't know where I'm going to find it, or how easy I'm going to find it. It's actually not even in this chapter, it's a little bit earlier. It was 2 chapters ago. Okay, be earlier than that. Uh, Earlier than that. Okay. No, this. Okay, I think this. Yes, this is where it is. I just need to check the specific language. I'm sorry that I'm doing this now and I'm not like pausing the video. It's just okay. Kenobi leaned over and was talking was talking easily to the trooper. So this is earlier when they're first arriving in Mos Eisley. His reaction was the opposite of Kenobi's. His voice is normal, but his expression peculiar. The way it is described when Luke is being trained to use the lightsaber and sense the Force to block the bolts from the remote drone thing, the way it's described is Kenobi puts on a low, mesmerizing voice. So I'm actually suspicious that what they're suggesting here is Kenobi was mind tricking Luke to empty his mind so that the Force would work, which is definitely an interesting twist. Not necessarily a problem, unless you want to be like, well, that is technically a violation of Luke. I mean, but it is. I can see that being a way to accelerate this, to at least give that demonstration so that you understand that this is possible and kind of sort of how it's possible. So then he does it on his own later, because it's only that one time, and this is before the helmet is on with the blast shield being down. When Luke parries that, that's when the quote I read about Han just saying it was luck. Is then that there's no indication that Kenobi had any connection to that. Any influence there. Have a tech inconsistency that, well, it still is a little inconsistent in another way as well. But, so it said previously when describing, and I talked a lot about this in that video, how you have two different modes of engines on spaceships. One that is anti-grav, that's essentially sublight, and then the lightspeed engine. And it specifically explains that the lightspeed engines cannot work in gravity wells, so you need to be away from a planet. Specifically, you needed to be 6 planetary diameters away, it said. But for Alderaan, they drop out 1 diameter away. The reason why this is curious is, okay, you enter hyperspace and now this stuff doesn't matter. So you drop out 1 diameter away because that gets you very close to the planet. You don't have as far to go at sublight. That's fine. But Han kind of threatens and boasts about the whole, because Luke is like, why can't we jump now? Why can't you just... He's like, we have to do these calculations to make sure we don't go through a black hole or something. It's like, why would that matter? Because if in the very next chapter you're talking about how, well, you're essentially setting up that, well, gravity doesn't matter when you're in hyperspace, then a black hole doesn't matter either. Although I guess to be fair, at the time this was written, we weren't sure the black holes existed yet, and they were just a consequence of general relativity. So, yes, black holes were theorized then, but they weren't confirmed. That, sorry, I have an itch on my nose and an itch in my throat. That is something that the Hubble Space Telescope confirmed with its observations, and that only went up in 1990. So, yes, they were still more so hypothetical. So I guess it is a little bit, that could be the explanation there, that you're just using this more mysterious term that maybe would. Kenobi did not sense Alderaan's destruction. This is actually very interesting, the difference here. I mean, very interesting, but it doesn't really impact the story one way or the other. What's interesting about it is, by having Kenobi be impacted, and having the line about like millions of voices cried out and then was silenced, is a powerful and dramatic line, and Alec Guinness delivers it perfectly. It also helps establish timing. So, because that's a singular event that now we have both when it happens at the Death Star and when it happens on the Falcon. There's an awareness at both. Also helps establish that the Force has the ability to grant such awareness. But that is not here in the book. And even later, when Vader is outside of the Falcon, and he's like, and is given the line, I sense something, a presence I've not felt in some time. And then he walks off, which is kind of weird when I think about it. It's like, why wouldn't he stay and try to figure that? Anyway, in this, it's just, he does have a feeling, but it's like, there's something undone. There's something I'm supposed to do and not doing. And then he walks off, which makes a bit more sense for him walking off. But he's not cognizant of it being his old teacher and friend, Obi-Wan Kenobi, there. He's just, there's something off. He's not sure what. So something I noted, and this is neither here nor there, kind of, but I did want to note it. Alderaan did have defenses and actually tried to use them. It does state that. In part because it also is like, well, Leia lied to us. Because she said that peaceful, they have no weapons. And it's like, well, apparently they did. That, is about equal to any other planet in the Empire. And it's like, well, I mean, which isn't too surprising. You would expect that. Anyway. But it does also help establish the idea that Alderaan did try to protect itself, failed. But also that the Death Star may have other defenses than just the primary laser. And more like the, I think they would technically be called point defense weapons, or at least it seems like they're sometimes referred to as that way. The turbo lasers that are on there that'll meant to stop fighter craft, but larger ships, it seems, at least based on Return of the Jedi, that you have to use the main laser. So, well, the smaller systems wouldn't necessarily help too much if you're taking shots from a planet. So I don't know. It would be neat if there were more information there, but at the same time, it's irrelevant. But it's something I wanted to know, because I do think it's interesting them pointing out in the story that, and she said they didn't have weapons. Okay, I want to skip that for the moment, because there's one thing that I could definitely talk more on, because it is interesting, and I do like it, but it is one of those things that is changed. That for continuing after this story, they had to make this change. One thing that it even annoys me in the movies, and it's in the book. We don't get an explanation in the book. How is it that they are on the Falcon? It has been boarded. They knock out the people. They take the stormtrooper armor, dress in it, so that people don't recognize them, right? I mean, so we know this. And we do now know it is Luke. At least it would have to have been Luke, who is the one that actually came down the ramp. And it's like, THX 1138, and his name, THX 1138, why aren't you at your post? Why aren't you at your post? And, he comes down and is like, you're just signaling there's something wrong with my comm link. And the guy's like, there's another one that's wrong, that's bad, I'm going to go check it out. It notes that they quickly noticed that the guards were missing. Okay, so it's like, why are you not there? Why are you not there? Why are you not there? Would be there putting on the armor, right? And then he's like, all right, I'm going to go down there and see if I can fix this. And he immediately goes to the door, and Chewie's right there, along with Han and Obi-Wan and the droids. How did they get there? That has bothered me in the movie as well. It's not a big concern, but it's like, how did they get there? I mean, in the book, it is clear this was quick, all right? That the time between the guards going up and getting knocked out and Luke coming down is very short. And yet they somehow moved the party through, and nobody saw anything. Nobody noticed the Wookiee walking by. I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure what else you could do. But it's, how did they do that? And it's also, how did they even know where to go is another problem. Because, as I recall, at least in the movie, it is depicted as that room is up above. So they would have had to have found a door, an exit from the hangar, to go in, go up a level somehow, whether it be elevator or stairs, go up and to this specific. How did they would have no idea where it was? They've never been on the Death Star before. Maybe all these hangars have a standardized layout that Han would be potentially familiar with. But otherwise, it's like, I got nothing. There's zero explanation for it. I understand why you need to have this moment here, but it is one of those, it shouldn't be possible. Because, I mean, and even that, how do you explain getting anyone off the ship? Because this is also, they would be watching. There should be more than just the guards. There should be people, like, walking around in the hangar and just be like, what are those people doing? Nothing. One other thing that this never occurred to me, I will grant it. Will grant that. But it is an interesting point. I could see some people that occurred to him being like, that is a better explanation. But they would cut it from the movie for time and such. So Luke has to bribe Han to actually go to rescue Leia, right? And it's like, she's rich. Rich. I mean, it's like, that's that scene there. Han does point out in the book, how rich can she be? Because the planet just blew up. It's not like he can get paid from anything there. And Luke is like scrambling a little bit, and you can tell because of how many things he lists off. And let me actually see, because it's right by the end. I'll just read the list, because I should find it. Rich, wait a minute. Reward from whom? From the government on Alderaan? He made a sweeping gesture towards the hangar, with the implication being Alderaan. Luke thought furiously. If she's being held here and scheduled to be executed, that means she must be dangerous in some way to whoever destroyed Alderaan, to whomever had the station built. So this is basically him stalling, him just blathering to get some time to think. You can bet it had something to do with the Empire instituting reign of full repression, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you who'll pay for her rescue. So this is like a full another paragraph. So he is just buying time. Who'll pay for her rescue and for the information she holds. The Senate, the Rebel Alliance, and every concern that did business with Alderaan. She could be the sole surviving heir of the off-world wealth of the entire system. That reward could be more wealth than you can imagine. And then we get to the, I don't know, I can imagine quite a bit, which is used in the movie. It is, I'm glad that it is in there, because it is a plot hole. That there is a point of how wealthy can she be? She doesn't have a planet anymore. But that is a reasonable answer, and it's also how it is delivered there, that he is just talking to give himself some time. And then he's listing off multiple that are, why would the Senate pay? I mean, seriously, why? I mean, it might be, thank you for saving her. All right, can I get a reward? Sure, here's a little bit, but it's like, I mean, he's owed technically 15,000. I mean, it's like, are they going to honor that? Why would they? The rebels, I think it's reasonable that they do. That's what I always figured in the movies, that they're the ones paying. Why they necessarily have that much money is a little unclear, but whatever. They're paying. And then bringing up the business concerns, I'm saying it's clear Luke is just grasping for whatever he can. But because Han is greedy enough, that's like, you give me this list, he's not necessarily thinking through, does this actually make any sense? He's not necessarily thinking through that. But is still okay, there are names here that this is possible. Is there something else? I feel like there might have been something else right here, but, oh, yeah, one other thing that is interesting. So the Senate has been dissolved for maybe only a day, so I guess it's reasonable they wouldn't be aware of that yet. It does also state Tarkin is having people told. And actually, I do need to go back to this point, because this is relevant for the point I skipped over, because I knew I could just go on about it. Here we go. Tarkin actually does have the Senate informed about the destruction of Alderaan. Yeah, the Senate is being informed of our action at this very moment. Soon we will be able to announce the extermination of the Alliance itself. Remember, the whole thing with the Death Star is terror, and Tarkin is completely desirous of that. He wants to terrorize these people, including the Senate. That exists, but is without power anymore. Okay. Despite his advances in intricate technological methods of annihilation, the actions of mankind remained unnoticeable to an uncaring and yet unimaginable vast universe. If Vader's grandest plans ever came to pass, all that would change. As he was well aware that despite all their intelligence and drive, the vastness and wonder were lost on the two men who continued to chatter monkey-like behind him. Tarkin and Admiral Mahdi were talented and ambitious, but they saw things only on the scale of human pettiness. It was a pity, Vader thought, that they did not possess the scope to match their abilities. Still, neither man was a Dark Lord. As such, little more could be expected of them. These two were useful now and dangerous, but someday they, like Alderaan, would have to be swept away. For now he could not afford to ignore them, and while he would have preferred the company of equals, he had to admit reluctantly that at this point he had no equals. I completely understand why they cannot continue that line into Empire Strikes Back. And, well, basically, outside of the story. Because Vader's already been kind of neutered by the end of this. The whole... And also, at one point, the plan was that Vader wouldn't survive. He said, I remember that being the rumor. But I haven't gotten there yet. We'll find out. But the whole, he's been cast off into space. So he needs to be the lieutenant to the Emperor. And I could go on about that as well. He needs to be the lieutenant to the Emperor so that his failure with the Death Star is less significant because there's still the bigger, badder guy behind him who is the Emperor. So just to quickly explain the lieutenant thing, this might be a better term for it. I don't know. But it is how I refer to a relationship like that where the Emperor, in the movies, we know very little about him. There's no real reason to be afraid of him except that Vader answers to him, and we know to be afraid of Vader. So that's that whole kind of lieutenant thing, because he is lesser, but it is when you are intimidated by the lieutenant, which is a lower officer, whoever's in charge of him, you know you need to be intimidated by as well. So it is interesting there. And here, if Vader's grandest plans ever came to pass, all that would change. So he has plans, which the way this is written does kind of suggest he would want to replace the Emperor, would want to go beyond the Emperor. But also there's a measure of vanity here as well that I think is interesting. The whole universe doesn't even know that we just destroyed Alderaan. Well, when I get my way, it will know. I mean, this is setting him up not only as a villain, well, not only as evil, but as a true villain, where he has these plans, has these machinations. And it also helps elevate the concept of a Dark Lord. Which, right now, I'd say is still kind of nebulous. It's just a term there, saying that, he's a Dark Lord of the Sith, or just Dark Lord as here. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Apparently just grander designs, bit more intimidating, can use the Force, and that's about all we got. But I do also think it interesting, he had to admit reluctantly that at this point he had no equals. Which is interesting because that kind of also suggests he doesn't consider the Emperor his equal either. Again, that's something that would have to change because he is the Emperor's lieutenant, which is more important in the later books. It doesn't need to be important in this one because the Emperor basically isn't present. He's a name. That's it. So, yeah, it is... I'm looking forward to seeing... I know this is one of those things that will change. But it will also be interesting to see if they do try to maintain some amount of him, a Vader, wanting to be the ultimate Lord here, the ultimate Dark Lord here, surpassing the Emperor. It will be interesting to see how that does manifest, assuming it does. Just trying to think if there's anything else to mention from it. Oh, there was one thing that was odd. I don't really need to try to find it specifically. So, they're in that control room. Kenobi has gone to a panel and is doing his thing looking for stuff. And R2 starts whistling excitedly because he and 3PO are also at a panel doing stuff. And it's like, okay, you found something. Nope. It's just, he's whistling, he's drawing all this attention to himself, and nobody cares. There is never an explanation for why he's doing this. Eventually, you just get Kenobi going, here, why don't you plug into the port? What? Why was he acting up? Can we have an explanation? No. Because I'm like, oh, did he, find something? And then it's like, okay, that's good, but here, if you connect it to go faster. See, that would make sense, because that's a logical progression of these events. But nope. Nope, it's just blah, blah, blah. All right. No idea what you're saying. We're not going to ask the dude that can translate. Why don't you just plug in and do whatever? I mean, it's one of those things that I know if I were the writer here and I did an editing pass, I would catch that. And even if I were an external editor, I'd be like, hey guys, why is he doing that? And it'd be like, I don't know. And it's like, if it were me writing it as well, I'd be like, yeah, get rid of that, rewrite it a little bit so it makes a little bit more sense. And just to give some explanation for why he has to go there, or that he didn't see it initially, but somebody else does. Even a comment of, how long is this going to take? Something like that from Luke or Han. And Kenobi then just looking around being like, R2, you can plug in right there, and you can now see everything on the station. That would make sense. Oh, one other thing that just reminded me about with the station. They mention it being bright, it appearing like a star and it getting larger as they approach, but they're not really thinking about this. Okay, that makes sense, because there's a star in the system that would be shining light, and we would see it like a full moon, right? But then says it's glowing. I mean, that's also a me thing where, like, in my Catherineverse stuff, the ships don't have lights on them unless they decide to turn them on, because, like, why? There's no point to running lights in space. You shouldn't be close enough that you'd see them. If you're doing something like that, it's going to be like radio wave broadcasts. That would make sense. Running lights don't. I mean, no other ship, nothing should ever be so close that those would make a difference. It would just be a waste of energy. I get it looks nice, especially in Star Trek. It looks nice to have those lights there to help explain why you can even see the ship. But they shouldn't be there. And it's just, why would the Death Star be glowing? I was like, it doesn't describe their planet, that there are lights on it. It does describe, though, that it is a much more intricate surface than what you see in the movies. It does do that, but it's okay kind of thing. It's like, whatever. It's not exactly the easiest to envision, except that it's basically a metal planetoid that has mountains like 2 kilometers high and such that are all clearly ordered. So artificial, very obviously, besides them being metal. But yeah. So I mean, it's that's neither here nor there. But it is just why is it glowing? It doesn't. There's no reason for it to glow. And because it does say like glowing, emanating light, not just glowing like, oh, there's a lot of light coming off. And no, that is emanating light. It's why. I'd love an explanation for that. But there isn't one in there. It may have just been a throwaway line. So anyway, stopping now. I've been noticing that I seem to be getting longer and longer with these videos. I'm not sure if it's I'm actually saying more or if I'm just getting more comfortable saying more. Two different things. More comfortable ranting versus actually having something to talk about. Anyway, stopping this. I'll see you next time for Chapter 9.